there are broad groups, but there's not one settled definition of this is a woman, and there never was.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say, like, how do you know you're a woman? How do you? Right?
Yeah.
And because, like, they want to put the impetus on me, but really neither of us can say this is what womanhood feels like, because there's no canonical womanhood out there to feel like or not feel like. There's no prototype of a woman.
Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. Come with us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I identify as a cisgender woman and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I have a conversation with EVEY WINTERS, a transgender advocate, educator, and hot sauce addict. EVEY's pronouns are she and her. She uses the labels transgender and transsexual woman and also educates about both of these labels. Find out what that means to EVEY in this episode. We also talk about identity and how it forms, manhood and womanhood versus masculinity and femininity, metagender, which is what's between cisgender and transgender, learning versus education, how to have conversations about gender, and exploring the uniqueness of womanhood. It was recorded on the 4th of April 2021. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. What's your name?
My name is EVEY Winters.
Welcome, Evie. And how do you identify?
Okay, I assume you're asking my pronouns. I take she, her pronouns.
Okay.
I'm a woman. I am also transgender.
Okay, yeah. So we mentioned a little bit about the question about identifying as versus being. So you said about, I assume you're asking me about my pronouns. I mean, it's a tricky thing for me because I've been learning about like the right question to ask, because some people don't like saying, oh, how do you identify? Because it's like, I am this or I am that. So, so what do you feel would be a good question to ask someone about their gender? How would you approach that?
So the language of identifying or identification as is it's classed in this like broad sort of microaggressive language that cis people have created for trans folk, because it helps y'all understand us better. And identify comes from the same place of let me put it this way. Would you ever say that about a cis person?
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah. The reason you make a distinction is because there's some discrepancy maybe between my appearance or and what my identity would be. Or so like, oh, I know that this person doesn't look like a woman. Quote, I'm doing air quotes. Okay.
Yeah.
But like they identify as a woman, right? Now, in my case, I don't have that problem. I model lingerie, so like it's whatever. But like people usually get my pronouns correct on the first go. But that whole language of identify as suggests that my identity, that my womanhood, that all of this that you see here is sort of an ongoing, maintained performance. And that I could stop doing that performance, that I could cease my womanhood just by simply not identifying anymore. That I have a default state. And my default state is that you would refer to me as a man. This is untrue. So that's the reason I sort of am like, and for what it's worth, other trans advocates make the same mistake. I'm not really judgy about it, but I do have strong opinions about the language of identification. I think ultimately it promotes a very harmful idea about identity. Just ultimately, like, how deep in the weeds do you want to get here?
I'm happy to get as deep as it takes, really. Because the thing is, when I started the podcast, I've been introducing myself as what I say basically is I identify as a cisgender woman. My pronouns are she and her. And now I'm having this conversation with this person who identifies as such and such. But I've been getting better at learning how to listen to the language people use, because some people actually say I identify as, and they don't have an issue with it, whereas other people say I am trans or I am a non-binary person, so I feel like when I started all these conversations, I did not know the distinction. I was not aware of it. So as
Yeah.
this evolves, like and my journey in the podcast as well, it'll be interesting to see how it will evolve. So it would be good to know, like, what would be a
Mm.
better question to ask.
So the thing is that you're having a one-on-one conversation with me, so my pronouns are unlikely to come up
Hmm.
at any point in this conversation,
Yeah.
because you're not speaking about me in the third person, and that's when we say pronouns, that's what we're talking about.
Hmm.
But let's come back to that question of identity, right?
Yeah.
My identity formed the exact same way yours did.
Hmm.
At age 3 to 4, after learning the concept of I
Hmm.
then had to learn how to relate to people. One of the ways I learned to relate to people was through the formation of gender,
Hmm.
right? Gender identity is indeed a part of identity. It is a part of us. To attempt to change it is tantamount to torture.
Hmm.
In the same way that if I tried to turn you into a gender that you were not,
Hmm.
that would require real harsh abuse on my part. And that's really what society attempts to do to trans people. That's why our mental health is the way it is, categorically. We're tortured starting at age 3 to 4 because we do form a gender identity the exact same way you did. Ours just doesn't match your expectations.
Hmm.
So there's no active, ongoing identification process there. It's just, I'm a woman.
Hmm.
And you might have noticed that I put my womanhood before my transness. I am a woman. I happen to be trans.
Hmm.
And that is the way I see it. I am a woman. Transness is my relationship to womanhood.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's great actually. That's really insightful. So
sure.
you have a group called You Might Want to Learn About Trans People, which I
So you
love.
might want to learn more.
More about trans people, okay?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, more definitely.
The more is so important.
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Because we all make assumptions, don't we? And we think once we meet one person, we kind of get an idea of what it all is or what it's all about.
Everybody has more to learn. I mean,
Totally.
I run the group with an amazing team of people,
Hmm.
and all the time the group is teaching me things.
Yeah, I
So,
bet. Yeah.
yeah.
So there was recently a post in it that I read, and it was so simple yet so profound. And someone
Hmm.
asked, if someone is born male, how do they know what it's like to be female? And how is it that people
Hmm.
can say, I've always felt like a woman when they actually don't know what it feels like because they don't have that experience? And I thought that is a really great way to simplify something like a question that I've had as well. And I thought it was
Yeah.
really good to have a conversation about that. So,
Hmm.
how would you answer that question, or how did you answer that question?
So the funny thing is, people will come to trans people with these questions.
Hmm.
Like, what does it mean to be a woman? You must know you're opting into this experience, right? First of all, I'm not. But
Hmm.
believe me, it would be so much easier on me to not be a woman. It's like somebody hands you the keys to like a Ferrari when you're born, and then like you hate it, but it's like a stick shift. You can't drive it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like manhood never made any sense to me. I was always terrible at it. I wrecked that car. I hurt people, like, to stick with my car metaphor, like it wasn't good. It wasn't a good time for me. It wasn't a good time for anybody around me. So there are sort of like two parts to this question. When cis people are asking that question of me, they're not asking about me.
Hmm.
Trans people are a mirror. We reflect back a lot of the assumptions and presumptions and attitudes, and we expose and make visible the defaults in society because we defy them.
Hmm.
And cis people have never had to question that. They've never thought about it. And now my presence makes them think about it.
Hmm.
So they're not asking about me. They're trying to get their footing again in a world that is different than they thought it was.
Hmm.
And I think there's like the academic answer, like, what is a woman, right? But that's not really what people are seeking. What they want to know is that they're okay.
Hmm.
People are not that interested in me as a trans person. They're interested in the impact I have on the world, their understanding. It's a lot of it is very self-interested. So when I ran this experiment on my page and got a surprising amount of feedback,
Hmm.
where I said, "Hey, what does womanhood mean to you? Like, define your womanhood. Don't look at anybody else's answer."
Hmm.
go in the comments, just tell me, what does womanhood mean to you? And I asked for cis people to do this, not trans people.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you, a lot of women appeared to say, well, womanhood is how I'm treated by society. Fair,
Mm-hmm.
fair. If that's the case, I am also treated that way, right? Like my day-to-day experience matches cisgender women pretty much exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to externally validate our gender, then I have that.
Mm-hmm.
Some women are like, well, it's periods and childbirth. It's this form of internal suffering. And I'm like, cool, good for you. Some women are like, it's nurturing and care, it's maternal.
Mm-hmm.
Some women see it as a form of creativity. Um, what I always find interesting in these little experiments is that people don't, there are broad groups, but there's not one settled definition of this as a woman. And there
Mm-hmm.
never was.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say, like, how do you know you're a woman? How do you?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
And because, like, they want to put the impetus on me, but really neither of us can say this is what womanhood feels like, because there's no canonical womanhood out there to feel like or not feel like. There's no
Totally.
prototype of a woman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I ask myself that question, actually, the more puzzled I become, to be fair. Because someone
Mm-hmm.
asked me in another episode, the episode with Cassian, who runs the gender census, they asked
Mm-hmm.
me, like, okay, if you look inside for your gender, what do you find? And I was a bit blown away. I was like, I don't know. I can't find anything. Oh my goodness, what does it mean? And
Mm-hmm.
they said, well, I've looked inside and I can't find anything either. So I've settled with a gender. But for some reason, you've settled as woman. And I was like, yeah. So we both can't find gender inside, but we both come to different
Mm-hmm.
conclusions. And I was like, that is so
Mm-hmm.
interesting, right? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
womanhood to me, like, what does it even mean? I feel like I don't even know anymore.
Oh, I
You
definitely
know?
feel very confident in my womanhood. I'm a woman. And to conceptualize this, I've been working at this for a long time to conceptualize, like, what is womanhood? Because it's like, well, is it stereotypes? Is it the way
Mm,
we dress and act and articulate ourselves? Is it being small and demure? You know,
hmm.
is it periods and childbirth? Is it being treated like dirt by society? Like, what is it? Where do I find it? Where do I go and compare
Yeah.
myself to womanhood? And I've never found it, but
Mm,
I've also found it.
do tell.
Every single woman has a womanhood that is unique to her. Every single one.
Hmm.
There are no two womanhoods that are exactly the same. Even if have you ever seen that have you ever been on TikTok?
I have seen some TikTok stuff. I've not been on it,
Um
but yeah.
that's fine. I don't think you
Mm,
need to actually be on the app, although it would help for the metaphor.
yeah.
TikTok, I think, is a beautiful demonstration of gender. Gender is a meme. It's a meme, but it's also part of us. And what I mean by that is on TikTok, someone will make a music video. It's like a short little clip. It's like 15, 20, 30 seconds,
Hmm.
I think. And they'll usually have some like audio in the background. And then somebody else will take that same audio and they will make a derivative video using the exact same audio. And then someone else will do it, and someone else will do it, and someone else will do it, and someone else will do it. And then
Mm,
eventually maybe another version of the audio gets made that's a little bit different. Maybe a different voice actor does it or something like that. Maybe it's a different version of the song. You've seen the TikTok dance crazes, right? People put their own little spin on it. No two people do it the exact same.
hmm.
Gender is quite like this. We pattern ourselves on one another, but we are not, like, we have our gender identity. What matters is that our gender identity is close enough to another person's to feel a sense of connection, to feel like that we have that secret handshake.
Hmm.
And those secret handshakes exist. You've probably had the experience of being out in public and some other woman will like look at you knowingly because a man is doing something frustrating in the environment. Like,
Totally.
and like that woman will give you the look and you know what that look means.
Uh-huh.
Like, ugh, men, right?
Totally.
That's one of the secret handshakes,
Hmm.
right? All it is being alike enough to
Mm,
be comparable. And so that has brought me to the metaphor that I use currently, which is womanhood is the internet.
right.
I primarily use a Mac. My Mac is set up for me. You
Hmm.
might be on a PC. Your PC is set up for you. and yet they are compatible. They speak a similar language. We talk the same.
Mm-hmm.
Independently, my Mac and your PC have nothing in common, but somehow they connect, somehow they work. And there are women that I have nothing in common with independently. Not at all, right? But there are women I do. And so I don't have to be connected to some central idea of womanhood because it's not like that. I'm connected to the network of women who are all connected to each other,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Sisters, not twins, like good eyebrows. So, like, we're not all patterned on the same prototype of a woman. Even in, Western society, womanhood can mean something different from one street block to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a big city, there's like, no, I was raised in this part of the city. I'm a different kind of woman.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm not like, I mean, okay, here's an example. I'm not like other girls,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's a language, it's a pattern, it's a form of communication that we have built into us because we form that bond and then the bond shapes us in return. So that's
Mm.
womanhood. Like there's no fixed womanhood. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
exist. It's defined by women. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
hope that helps.
Oh, yeah. It definitely helps me to have more questions, like, and kind of be more confused, really. Well,
Hmm.
not confused, more intrigued, really, because when I think about just all the experiences, I don't know if, like, how would I separate, like, my experience as a woman from my experience just as a human, as a
Hmm.
human being, just living my life.
Why do you need to?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
I
I
don't.
don't. Mm, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there are just certain questions that like they're interesting questions, but they don't materially impact our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's one of them. Like there's a certain point where begging the question even further only brings up suffering. Like the end conclusion here is there's no part of our identity that is real.
Mm,
The concept of I, my awareness of myself, my ability to say I am hungry, that's learned. My ability to even have that thought, that awareness that like I am an individual human being, that's learned.
mm-hmm.
You learn that. You're not born with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like first, and you can look this up, this is childhood development. First, we learn to see ourselves as individuals. This is why toddlers cannot possibly conceptualize of like empathy,
Right.
right? This is why toddlers are little jerks. And we love them, and we love them. We love them. They're very adorable little jerks, but they are little jerks all the same because they have no sense of empathy. They haven't reconnected with people. They are still forming their I.
Mm-hmm.
And then they do form a sense of connection with other people. Again, they start to conceptualize that there are human beings who are
Mm-hmm.
like them, right? They start to understand that mom and dad are like them. They start to understand that mom and mom are like them. They start to understand that mom and ama are like them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they start sorting, which is what humans do. And a 3-year-old is not sorting based on advanced philosophical ideas about gender. Socrates was not 3 when he started this nonsense, right? Like this internal questioning, right? Like, I feel like as kids, we're so open to so many experiences and we don't really question it. We just take in. And that's really what's happening at 3 and 4. And nobody really can say, like, oh my God, is gender a learned experience? I don't think it's entirely learned. There's another part to this equation, which
Okay.
is I tell everybody you have 3 teachers. Those teachers are acceptance, rejection, and indifference. Every person has them. In your life, everything you've ever learned about yourself was learned through these 3 teachers. Do you like chocolate? What's your favorite food?
Oh, I have many, but I definitely like chocolate.
Okay, great. Look, we'll use chocolate because chocolate is an excellent example of
It
this.
is.
So many people are like, oh, I like chocolate, right? But there are some people who love chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
How did they get there? How do they know they love chocolate? Well, they learned. And they learned because acceptance, because craving taught them that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I had chocolate. It's good. I want to do this again. That was a good and pleasurable experience. A
Mm-hmm.
plus, my brain liked it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? I put on a dress. It felt amazing. My brain flooded with good, happy chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
More dresses for me, please. right?
Mm.
But also, I put my hand on a hot stove and that hurt.
Mhm.
And so I reject that. No, thank you. That made me unhappy,
Mhm.
right? And then this one's always very hard to do. Then there's the air, which people don't tend to notice until you point out the air.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, I noticed the air. And that lack of noticing is neutrality. The thing sort of fades in the background. We don't really have opinions about it. It doesn't matter to us. It's neither here nor there.
Mhm.
And we have a lot of things we're like that about. We're like, yeah, I can take it or leave it,
Mm.
right? Those three things teach us everything. They teach us who we love, what we like to have done to us sexually, what clothes we enjoy, what movies we like, what college courses we want to take. All of it. They teach us everything about who we are.
Mhm.
And those responses are not necessarily socialized. So there's an aspect of gender that is just a natural consequence of our brain doing what brains do, taking in information, making a binary choice. Or not really a binary choice. It's like, do I like it, dislike it, or don't care?
Mhm.
And then based on that, you build up more and more and more and more things that are you. Like, oh, I like this. I am a person who likes chocolate. But then you have more chocolate and you're like, no, I'm a person who loves chocolate. Right. And then
Mhm.
some people go so far into the chocolate that they become chocoholics. It becomes a part of their identity.
Mhm.
Right. They're not just a person who loves chocolate. They will introduce themselves. They will put it in their professional speaking bios. Chocoholic.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
They put it
Yeah.
right there with their gender.
Wow. Yeah.
So we have out here, we've got a network of people we connect to. How do I know I connect to them? I enjoy connecting to them. That feels good and right to me. Connecting with
Mhm.
men, you know? No,
Yeah.
thank you. And it's not just a rejection of manhood. It's that every time I'm around a man, I'm like,
Mhm.
nope.
Mm.
They are interesting to me, but I'm so glad I'm not one.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
tried that for a couple decades. It didn't feel good.
Mhm.
And so like those are my three teachers telling me this is a group of people I connect to. And also helping me learn what my womanhood looked like for me.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That is wow. That is so insightful. And so I think you also compared it. Was it to like writing with your left hand or your right hand?
Hmm.
Because you just know what works for you, right, and what
Yeah,
feels good or what feels right.
those are your three teachers. You try writing with your left hand. What are you going to do? You're going to reject that experience
Mm.
because that doesn't, or your non-dominant hand, I should say. You
Mm.
might. Now, I'm an interesting case here because I'm a little bit ambidextrous.
Ah, okay.
Um, but
Mhm.
I have a preferred hand for different activities.
Ah, interesting.
So yeah, when I eat left-handed, but like I write right-handed. So
Ah, okay.
it's very weird. But yeah, like you know when you're doing it in a way that is uncomfortable for you.
Mhm.
And there's no template out there that says what's right or wrong. You just know.
Mhm. Yeah,
Hmm.
totally. Yeah, that reminds me as well. There was one of my guests, Yaz, actually said they think they associate more with womanhood than manhood, but more with masculinity than femininity. And then it got me thinking about
Hmm.
being a man or a woman versus femininity and masculinity. How do
Hmm.
you see how do you see those terms and how do you see the difference in those things?
I love that. Each network, each gender has its own variant of masculine and feminine. And that people are always like, well, why weren't you just a feminine man? Because I'm not a man. Like, that's all there is to it. I'm not a
Mhm.
man. I didn't know what kind of woman I was, but I knew for sure I wasn't a man.
Mhm.
And like, so being a feminine man was not doing it for me. Because a lot of times femininity and masculinity are part of the performative aspects of, there's no like internal state of feminine and masculine. There are presentational states of feminine and masculine, though. The way we dress, the way we interact with others, right?
Mhm.
And those are moving targets. What is defined as feminine and masculine is much more social than even gender is.
Mm.
Um, because I mean, like you just one need only look at the colors we dress babies to know how quickly that can change. You know, as a child, if we had been going by Victorian colors, I would have been, even though I was assigned male at birth, I would have been dressed up in beautiful pinks,
Mhm.
right? And then at some point it changed to blue.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then blue became the masculine color. So masculine and feminine are different conceptualizations. They are stylizations, they are performances, they are the language through which we can communicate our gender in part.
Mm.
So to be a masculine woman can have a lot in common with masculine men. And masculine women might get along with masculine men, right?
Mm.
But that's not the same as being a man or
Totally.
being a masculine woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are masculine trans women,
Mm-hmm.
right? They still enjoy presenting masculine. They just are women. So I consider masculine and feminine to be much more social categories than gender is, even though gender is a very social experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about masculine and feminine as well. And I was thinking certain qualities are assigned masculine and feminine, aren't they? But like, why do they have to be masculine or feminine? They just are what they are. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good one. I love that one. What's your favorite kind of music?
Um,
I
Indie.
have a point, I promise. Indie
Okay.
music.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite indie artist?
Ooh. Well, I like Two Door Cinema Club. That's what comes to mind at the moment.
That's new to me. Are they from your country?
You know what? I'm not entirely sure where they're from. I think they are. I
Fair,
should know this
fair.
stuff.
Okay, so here's an example. If you were to go to a Two Door Cinema Club concert,
Hmm.
how would they be dressed? Or how would you be dressed?
How would I be dressed?
Hmm.
I That is a good question. I would wear what I feel like wearing on the day, which I
Hmm.
don't know what that would be like. Is that helpful? Maybe it's not.
And no, it actually is kind of
Yeah.
helpful.
Okay.
I have a friend who's very into My Chemical Romance, formerly into Marilyn Manson before it was revealed that he actually is just a terrible person. Very into like dark metal, bleach white face paint, black eyeliner all over the place.
Mm.
Lines across the nose and eyeliner, all sorts of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful person. Beautiful person. Dark black clothes, chains everywhere, spikes everywhere. This
Hmm.
person is a walking warning label. Um, but that's sort of like dangerous attraction.
Yeah.
Anyway, I imagine if my friend were to go to the Two Door Cinema Club concert, they might stand out a little bit against the way people dress there.
That is true.
How did that get decided?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually an interesting one because as you were saying that, I was thinking I'm into heavy metal as well, and
Mm-hmm.
I think if I were going to a heavy metal gig, I might, or I definitely used to dress like in black with my band t-shirts on.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
did.
so I would have dressed
Like I have
differently.
a so this is my first tattoo ever. This is from Linkin Park. Linkin
Cool,
Park is my favorite band in the whole world. Kept me alive for years.
nice.
I owe everything to that band. Literally, it's just like they kept me going. And I love Linkin Park. I love the music. I love it.
Hmm.
I also love like pop music. I, in my fashion, very much enjoy vintage dresses and kitten heels. I love leggings and bright, colorful things. And if I showed up to a Linkin Park concert looking like Elle Woods, people would be confused.
True.
And there's no overarching authority that said this is what Linkin Park fans dress like. And over time, it changed.
Hmm.
Linkin Park fans dressed one way at the beginning, but as Linkin Park changed their styling, so did the fans. And the fans didn't always match. There was like a spectrum of
Hmm.
like where you could be and like what you could almost tell by dress what point someone joined the fandom, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And how did that get written? It just did. Fashion and styling and really honestly what happens is that's the TikTok part, right? Someone says, "You know what? I'm going to introduce this into my womanhood." And then other people are like, "Yes, that."
Hmm.
And then they do it, and now enough women are doing the thing
Hmm.
that it has joined womanhood
Mm.
or
Yeah.
femininity, I should say, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Still confused about that one, really. Trying to figure it
Um,
out. Yeah.
mhm. Well, I think womanhood, there's no reason it has to be this way,
Mm.
but women tend to define femininity because women make up the bulk of feminine people,
Mm-hmm.
whereas men tend to define masculinity because men make up the majority of masculine people.
Mm-hmm.
The mean will sort of define the center,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and so like what's masculine can change,
Mm-hmm.
and
Totally.
what's feminine can change. You just need to convince enough people to change it. But
Wow.
that's
Yeah.
styling. That's personal. That's personal. There's
Mm.
no masculine and feminine out there that is like wholly undefined.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. This is kind of mind blowing, really, because like the more conversations I have, like the less I understand it all. But it's good. Like
Mm.
I will remain curious. So yeah,
That's a good place to stay.
I think so. Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
I'm a Buddhist. I gave up on trying to understand anything.
Yeah.
You get
Uh,
enough in the weeds on that, and you're like, I give up and don't care anymore. Like,
totally. Yeah. Yeah.
mhm.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. So I was thinking, let's talk a bit more about your group actually, because I love
Yeah,
the
sure.
group. It's about education basically, isn't it? And you've got some theme days, which I really love, which is kind of
I
ask
love
me
them so much.
anything. They're
Yeah,
so great.
yeah.
I really like them a lot. And it's just
Mm.
so open and some people recently were asking about term, which is it a fairly new term, I believe, metagender.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Can you talk a bit more about that one? Because I find it fascinating. Because
Um,
if you would think like there's almost a binary in like cis and trans, it's
mm,
like you're either cis or you're trans. But
mhm.
then the term metagender appeared. So what happened
Let's
there?
break it, right?
Yeah.
So there are, here's the thing. Whenever, and words are quite like gender.
Mm,
What I mean is that when I give you a word, you form your own conceptualization of that word.
mm,
You will never have the exact same understanding of that word as I do. Your understanding will always have
mm,
your own personal spin on it. Like if I say imagine a cow, we're probably imagining a cow that is similar enough, right? For us to communicate. It's close enough. It's not the exact same thing, but it's close enough. Broad identification terms like human, transgender, man, woman. As we've already discovered earlier in this conversation, these don't have a fixed categorical definition.
mm,
And attempting to create one often creates as many problems as it solves.
mm,
The term transgender has a very, very broad meaning, which is just you're not the gender you're assigned at birth. That's
mm,
it. And legally, it is used that way.
mm,
Medically, it is used that way. Are you the gender you're assigned at birth? Yes or no?
mm.
That's a very binary decision.
Yeah.
And for their purposes, even people who, like for if you go into a doctor, even people who are not transgender but are not the gender assigned at birth have to play into that dynamic because medicine and law change very slowly.
Mm,
But that's only one facet of the word transgender.
mm,
Transgender has other facets. One of those facets is a social understanding of what that word means. And the social definition of that word is nothing like that. And I can demonstrate this by asking any random person on the street, hey, if I showed you a transgender person, if there were a transgender person walking towards you on the street, just imagine them. What do they look like? Most people imagine someone like me. They will imagine someone who was assigned male at birth. The person they imagine may or may not be visibly trans. When I say that, being visibly assigned male at birth, right? Like this person has secondary sex characteristics that would sort of out them as having been assigned male at birth,
mm,
and so that's called visibly trans.
mm,
Um, they might imagine someone like me. Nobody clocks me. That doesn't happen to me.
mm,
But almost always they imagine a trans woman. If that person is relatively well informed, they may know that trans men exist.
mm,
And again, their idea, their conceptualization of what does a trans man look like might be different. And if they're really well informed, they might know that non-binary people actually exist and aren't just a joke.
mm,
So social understanding of the word transgender is not great. It does not mirror that fixed definition.
mm.
And there's a strong sense of medicalization to the term
Yeah.
because of that. People think of me, they think of surgeries and hormones. They think of the way I dress, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have this situation where when people hear transgender, they think trans woman, probably getting surgery, probably taking hormones. And if you're a non binary person who's assigned female at birth and doesn't take hormones, right? If you just don't care, if you're not doing anything medically to transition or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
if you're in that category of like non binary people for whom my experience is nothing like yours, the social understanding of transgender is nothing like yours, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't really feel right, right? Like being a part of my narrative,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily feel great to them. And they have the right to not be forced to use that label. And so many people don't. Many people will say, well, I'm not trans though. Like that whole everything going on with transness just doesn't involve me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's never been a word for that. And it's funny you mentioned an agender person because the person I was in a chat with a person who's very close to me, very, very close to me. And they were sort of struggling through this. Like
Mm-hmm.
to be called trans didn't sit right with them.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no word for the other thing. It was just, I'm not trans. There was no positive way to define that.
Mm-hmm.
So we created a way.
Excellent.
Yeah, and so meta actually sits sort of in the middle of in the difference between cis and trans in Latin and scientific terms. And so that's where we got meta from, is it's aside from that dynamic.
Mm. Yeah. So this is interesting to sort of try and get my head around because
Mm-hmm.
I've seen sort of some graphics that are really useful. For example, there's the umbrella graphic. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
transgender as an umbrella, and then there's binary and non-binary under that umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking, okay, non-binary can also be falling outside of the trans umbrella because I've met people who are non-binary but not trans. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's all these facets to it.
That's where metagender lives.
Yeah, yeah,
Not cis, but not trans.
yeah. Wow. Because in a way, cis and trans, there's the whole sex conversation as well, like
Sure.
separating like a womanhood, for example, or being a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you take your body out of the equation, like for example, someone, even if you ask a cis person, if you ask me like, okay, how do you identify womanhood or how do you experience womanhood? I mean, if you take your body out of the equation,
Mm-hmm.
what's kind of left there? And that's when things get a bit tricky, don't they? It's like if you take your
Mm-hmm.
biology away, then how are you a woman still? Obviously you still are, but what does that look like? What is that
I
experience like? Yeah.
Yeah, I dislike that question immensely
Okay.
because that's not how people work.
Of course not. No, you can't separate those things. Yeah.
Exactly. So why do we
Yeah.
do that? Why are we like,
Mm,
well, let's strip out all the inconvenient humanity here. Let's
right.
strip like my I do require my body match in
Mm-hmm.
that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying there's some external definition of womanhood, but like my
Mm-hmm.
feeling of security and that network of womanhood
Mm-hmm.
requires me to change my body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to like match my internal blueprint. Where did that blueprint come from? Does it matter?
Mm-hmm.
I think it only matters if you're trying to stop or change a natural process.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to stop doing that. But yeah, like I had a place I was going with this. Oh yeah, but like we try to go. Well, let's strip out the parts that don't make sense. But like that's not how humans work. Our
Exactly.
identities, our concepts of ourselves, all of that are a feedback loop, and part of that feedback loop is our body.
Mm-hmm.
Like our gender is in some ways part of like our relationship with our body, right? um
Yeah. Yeah. How could it not be? Yeah.
yeah, so like
Mm-hmm.
this is one of those things is where people ask that question. I'm like, I'm not going to answer it because like it's not, you can't like you cannot conceptualize of yourself without your body. Like whatever you come up with is just you making something up.
Mm.
So
Yeah. 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 That's a good point. I mean, when I was thinking about that more, I was like, if I even try to, sort
mm,
of what if I try in my head to take my body out of the equation, then there's like social conditioning and there's how I was brought up and all these examples around me and stuff like that. But in a way, like, yeah, your body always comes. Oh, well, it's linked, isn't
It's
it?
part of the equation. It's
Yeah.
it's the video game console through which you experience the world, right?
I love it.
Like
Yeah.
like we're all in this giant MMORPG, and this is the way we connect to it.
Mm.
So like this is our character, and our experiences in game, as they
Mm.
were, are partially influenced by our character.
Mm.
Like, is my body me? No, but also yes.
Mm. Yeah.
Welcome to philosophy.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, so like there's just a whole category of questions where I'm like, you're asking this question to try and get a level of certainty that like you can't have.
Mm. Mhm.
And I think it's all the wrong question.
Mm.
We spend so much time trying to validate everything. We have to check, we have to be sure. And I think that impulse to have to check and be sure instead of just trusting people to tell us who they are,
Mhm.
that says a lot.
It does, yeah. So tell me what some good questions are to ask.
You mean it like the introduction of a show or?
Well, I guess when you're maybe getting to know people, because obviously we're having a conversation that we agree to have, and
Yeah.
and the thing is, normally if you meet someone who has got a different gender experience than you
Mm-hmm.
do, it's not necessarily, appropriate to ask them about it. So, or like ask certain questions about it, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, what would be a good way to?
I love this. Thank you for asking this. So, I assume you exist in a world and a social dynamic in which men are included.
Yep.
When is the last time you were talking to a cisgender man and you're like, hey, can you tell me what manhood is like for you?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had that conversation so
Yeah,
much.
nobody has because no one cares. Um,
Yeah,
like, no, nobody really, like, philosophers care about that sort of thing. Have you ever spent a long time talking to a philosopher?
not a long time.
It's
No.
an interesting experience. One of my partners is a philosophy grad student, and like,
Yeah.
mm, yep, lovely, lovely human being, lovely person. But
Hmm.
like, sometimes I'm like, okay, that's enough Kierkegaard
Hmm.
for now. Yeah. Um, but nobody asks those questions about cis men. People
Hmm.
only change the script for people who are trans that they can observe are trans. No one asks me about my womanhood until they find out I'm trans.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, I don't go to like I sometimes make it a point not to tell people I'm trans.
Mm.
I'll go to like business meetings and things like that. I'll be sitting at a table with business leaders, powerful people, and they have no idea. And they'll start talking about like the trans problem and how to
Mm.
handle us in marketing and their bathroom signage and things like that. I'll let it go on for 10 to 15 minutes and then I'll be like, actually, I'm trans, so why don't you ask me? And
Ah.
I have never seen so many men go white at one
Mm.
time as when I pull that. It's such a power play. I love it. Because they're so afraid of
Mm.
like, oh my God, what have we just said? Right.
Hmm.
So how do you get to know somebody? You talk to them. I care more about somebody's astrological sign.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, okay, but are you a Libra though? Like, are you a water sign? Like, I care more about that when I'm getting to know somebody than I do their gender.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because like their gender, whatever, we'll get to it. But like,
Mm.
listen, if they're a Taurus, I need to know that going into this,
Mm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
what are your big three?
I should have
Um,
said I'm a Taurus.
are you a Taurus? Did I nail
I,
that?
I, I am a Taurus.
I'm a
Yeah.
Virgo. I have it
Oh.
actually on my. I have these cards. I call them calling cards
Yeah.
because I hate introducing myself because everybody's like, oh, what are your pronouns? I'm just like, here, just take my card. And
Hmm.
on here, I have some sentences that use my pronouns, and one of them is that I'm the Virgoest Virgo to have ever Virgoed. So
I love it.
yeah, so
Yeah.
uh,
Uh,
but like, there's so much more to people, and people get
yeah.
so obsessed about gender when they meet a trans person. It's like that's the
Hmm.
least interesting thing about me. I promise. So I mean, when we started this, a great way to ask me the question you ask me
Hmm.
instead of like, how do you identify, would just be, how do I refer to you?
Okay. Hmm.
That's an effective way to get what you need, which is, how do you talk about me?
Hmm.
And then I can choose what I give you. So like, I know when you ask me that, you're asking about my pronouns, but I might be comfortable just letting you make an assumption. I do
Mm-hmm.
that all the time. People assume my pronouns all the time. And it's fine because they assume right. But
Yeah.
like for other people, it'd be like I would take that opportunity to be like, actually, I take she, her pronouns,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
But yeah, just like I just put aside the whole question. But like
Mm.
I'm a trans person, so like when I meet other trans people, I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? How we are so obsessed with that facet of a person's identity.
It's
Yeah.
because we break the script.
Mm.
Have you ever watched The Matrix?
Yes. I love The Matrix.
I'm so glad you love it. Do you know that movie was written by trans women?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole thing's one giant trans allegory.
Mm.
And when you meet Neo,
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. And people get interested in it.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm trying to stop myself from coughing. So
That's fair.
during COVID times, you so much as act like you have a cough. You so much as
Oh,
like
yeah.
cough a little bit, and everybody's like, "Oh my god, are you dying?"
Freaking out. Yeah.
No, I've already had it once. Never again. Thank you.
Mm.
Whereas like, oh yeah, but like when I meet a trans person, it's like, okay, cool, you're a woman, a man, non-binary, great. Non-binary people I always take more of an interest in because
Mm.
there's no there currently are very few, like there's very little like non-binary culture. That's growing, right?
Mm.
Like I go to a store, there's a section dedicated to me. The
Mm-hmm.
world tells me what femininity can look like, but
Mm.
non-binary people are creating that.
Mm-hmm.
And so every non-binary person is like they have their own very personal styling, which is often remixed from what they can find elsewhere. But like fashion and personal styling, and just like as soon as a person tells me they're non-binary, I'm so interested in the decisions they make in their personal styling.
Mm.
Not about the
Mm.
gender, whatever. Like gender's gender. You have a gender, cool, great, good. But like I do want to know about the combat boots. Like,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I mean,
Okay.
basically, just it's so fascinating to see people meet trans people because they
Mm-hmm.
get weird. They get so weird. This is why I don't tell people I'm trans because there are two ways I can be treated. I can be treated as a trans person or as a woman, and they're not the
Mm.
same.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like how people treat me when they treat me as a trans person. And I'm working really hard. Like that's where my advocacy is focused. Is like I want transness to be normalized
Mm-hmm.
so that people stop doing that crap. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like to get to a place where it's a non-issue, you first have to have those conversations, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I recommend anyone join your wonderful group and just
I
learn
love
more.
it. I love the group.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of the people there. And we're doing so much. We just launched a YouTube channel and we're going to be putting materials there. I have my own YouTube channel. We just did, we're doing some other cool stuff. There's a reason I brought a $300 microphone
Mm-hmm.
um, that I don't have. And a lot of that got put on hold by my surgery being rescheduled. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm so excited.
Mm. So how do you see that developing further?
Oh, the group?
Yeah.
Right now, we really like we're not the largest education group of our kind, and actually, that's a distinction I want to draw. You said
Mm-hmm.
we're an education group, and I accept that wording, but I don't think of us as an education group. I think of us as a learning group,
Okay.
and these are very different words.
Mm-hmm.
Learning talks about the person who's doing the learning, right? I'm taking something, I'm learning, I'm getting new information. Education is me like putting it on you,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
When we think about education, it does have a coercive sort of tone to it,
It does. Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
don't do that.
Mm.
So I think of us as a learning group. We have expectations of people, and our expectation is that when you come in, you are willing and able to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people aren't, but that's not like we're going to put this education on you. You need to get educated.
Mm.
It's you should always be learning more. And so we try to encourage that sense of curiosity and fascination, but also healthy understanding.
Mm.
Um, and I think it works. I think the model works. We've been sort of like publicly visible now for we're just now hitting 2 months, and the group already has just a little under 5,000 people.
Yeah. It's gone
Um,
so fast. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
and I think it'll keep growing
Oh,
because it
absolutely.
because it works.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up? I'm sure we could talk for hours, but
We
yeah,
could.
we totally could.
Is this the part where I do the thing like I plug some of the stuff I work on, or is that what this is
Oh,
for? Or
totally. Yeah, yeah. If any last thoughts or yeah, anything you want to mention, feel
oh
free.
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, of course, the group is you might want to learn more about trans people. We do have sister groups. You might want to learn about more. You might want to learn more about polyamory.
Hmm?
We also have some support groups. They're great. We have like 6 groups in our little family. We have a very active Discord server. It's about 2,000 people. You can easily find that from our website, wanttolearnmore.com.
Mm-hmm.
My personal website is where I keep my writing, eveywinters.com. And I do have a book coming out later this year on transition for trans women. And some of the topics that we discussed today are actually part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. This surgery that I'm having in 2 days and some odd
Wow.
hours is actually the last piece of the puzzle. I need to really feel like I can finish it.
Mm-hmm.
So my plan is that it should be out by August, but I'm hoping, I'm hoping that's my ambitious goal, but it'll definitely be
Mm-hmm.
this year.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. 2 days. That must be so. Wow. Yeah.
It's I was putting together all my prescriptions last night. I do it every Saturday night. I was putting my prescriptions together,
Mm-hmm.
and I hit Wednesday, which is when my surgery is. I hit Wednesday in the map, and I started crying because a lot of the medicines I have to take, I won't have to take after Wednesday.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
It's just it's like it was the first physical manifestation of this change.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
was a whole thing.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah. EVEYWINTERS.com. I'm very easy to find. You can. There's literally one of me. As far
Mm-hmm.
as I can tell, there's no other Evie Winters anywhere. EVEY, by the way. Everybody spells it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But EVEYWINTERS.com. That's the best place to find me. That's my actual name, not an online moniker. WantToLearnMore.com is the easiest way to find our things, including a canonical definition of metagender
Mm-hmm.
for people that want to learn more about that.
Mm.
I don't know
Awesome.
if I have anything else. I hope that your listeners will come join the group. It's just
Absolutely.
such a positive environment. I'm so
Yeah.
proud of everyone there.
I love it in there. It is very friendly and accepting as well. And,
It's definitely not the normal trans learning experience. There's usually like 2 modes, which is like I'm gonna be like a good little trans person and coddle cisgender people,
mm,
or I'm gonna yell at cisgender people. These are like our 2 modes.
yeah.
And I don't know, I think those just flip between abuser and abused.
Mm, mm,
And
yeah.
we're trying to find the middle path.
Yeah. I think
We
I
want
think
to,
you're doing a great job finding that. I think you found it.
I'm trying. It
Yeah.
takes effort and there's a
Yeah.
strain
It's
to
an
it.
ongoing thing, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
We have a wonderful, wonderful team of admins and
Mm-hmm.
moderators, and everybody's really dedicated to keeping that middle path. So I really hope people will
Mm.
come join us and learn with us.
Well, I shall put the word out for sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Evie, which is EVEY, where you can also read the transcript. And you can find Evie on her website, eveywinters.com, again, EVEY, and the group You Might Want to Learn More About Trans People on wanttolearnmore.com, as well as on Facebook and Discord. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com and on social media. If you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Plans start from only $1 a month. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender for more details. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded. Oh, best of luck with your surgery. It's
Thank
like,
you.
wow, yeah, so exciting. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yes. Thank you for rescheduling so quickly with me.
yeah,
When I found out about it, it's funny. I made that arrangement with you, and then
yeah,
an hour later, I got that phone call. It's like,
amazing.
well,
Actually,
so
yeah,
yeah. Actually, I need to change it. Sorry, I lied.
surprise. Yeah.
Um,